I am now about to do something that has not been done in most UU churches for the past 50 to 100 years. I am going to read a passage from the King James Version of the Bible. Now, before you scramble to click away and leave the video, I invite you to humor me, as I think you will see very early on that there is method to my madness. This passage is taken from the 24th chapter of the book of Numbers, verses 8 and 9. God brought him forth out of Egypt. He hath, as it were, the strength of an unicorn. He shall eat up the nations his enemies, and shall break their bones, and pierce them through with his arrows. He couched, he lay down as a lion, and as a great lion, who shall stir him up? Blessed is he that blesseth thee, and cursed is he that curseth thee. When I was in seminary, I was required to complete a year of supervised ministry by spending a year serving as an intern of a local area congregation. Unfortunately, I was not able to find an opening at any of the UU churches in Dallas or Fort Worth, so one of my colleagues recommended that I try reaching out to the Welcome Table Christian Church in Arlington, Texas, a Disciples of Christ congregation that was known for being on the liberal and progressive end of the theological spectrum. I emailed the minister, who very graciously said that they would be happy to have me on their staff. In the summer that I arrived at the church, I got the opportunity to take part in an unusual tradition that had begun the summer before when I arrived at the church. Instead of the usual sermon series that the church did every month, the minister invited the congregation to text or email suggestions for different Bible passages and topics to preach on, inviting them to give feedback on what they wanted to hear. My immediate response was to pull out my phone in the middle of the service and text him with my vote for the topic of unicorns in the Bible. Now, the first time that I texted that suggestion to him, it was meant mostly as a joke. For those who do not know, I have a long-standing and well-documented pathological obsession with all things having to do with unicorns, something that my friends and colleagues who attended the church had already warned the minister in advance. I could imagine the minister responding back with a response along the lines of, "Why am I not surprised that you would say something like that?" But the second time that he asked the congregation for sermon suggestions, I texted him the same topic. But this time, I was very much serious. I looked up to that minister not just as a supervisor, but as a mentor, and I was interested what he would do with that kind of challenge, and I wanted to see the sermon that would result. But, alas, the unicorn sermon never materialized. And then the minister went out of town and entrusted the pulpit to his ready and willing intern minister. While I was trying to figure out what to preach on, it was at that point that I figured that if it is a sermon about unicorns that I wanted, that it was a sermon about unicorns that I was just going to have to preach for myself. So, brace yourself, intrepid congregation. This is my unicorn sermon. Now, it is admittedly a stretch to spend an entire sermon talking about unicorns in the Bible. The word unicorn appears 9 times in the Bible, like in Numbers 24:8, mostly in the Hebrew Bible, and only in the King James Version, which was completed in 1611. And most biblical scholars will tell you that this is the result of a translation error. Numbers forms one of the 5 books of the Torah, the sacred text of Judaism, so it was originally written in Hebrew. The Hebrew word in Numbers 24:8 is re'em, which is a word that Western European biblical translators were completely unfamiliar with, but they were fairly sure that it was some type of large, strong animal. Now, whenever the translators for the King James Version of the Bible encountered a Hebrew word that they did not recognize, they would cross-reference that word with the Septuagint, a complete Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible that was readily available at the time, to see what the corresponding Greek word would have been in order to base their translation off of that. The Greek word for re'em was monokeros, which literally translates to one horn. Based upon this, the translators for the King James Version decided that the most relevant word for their English translation was unicorn. Now, it may seem unusual now, based on the images of unicorns that we have today, but the concept of unicorns would have been very familiar to Western European society during the Renaissance. The Greek historian of the 5th century BC, Ctesias, recounted stories that he had heard while traveling in Persia about an animal that resembled a wild ass with a horn that was, quote, one of the strongest of all creatures. It defends itself with its horn, teeth, and hooves, and slays many horses and men. The Chinese prominently featured a unicorn-like creature in their mythology called a qi lin, which had the front half of a horse with a single horn and the back half of a dragon or fish, sort of a unicorn-mermaid hybrid, if you will, before it was on trend. It was said to be a symbol of luck, good omens, protection, prosperity, success, and longevity. The animal found its way into Buddhist and Taoist cosmology, being seen as gentle and benevolent creatures who floated upon the clouds, but would become enraged if there were evil forces that threatened the human realm, often spitting fire and showing several different powers that varied from story to story, which is awesome. Although there was no physical proof that such a creature existed, further mentions of it by Aristotle and Pliny the Elder meant that the unicorn was entered into the Physiologus, a Greek zoological text that was a reference to all the many creatures that existed in the world. The unicorn was the perfect way to describe the powerful horned creature from the early Hebrew translations, but because the unicorn was also associated with being a representation of the divine, it was also associated as a symbol of innocence, purity, and self-sacrifice. In a sense, the unicorn came to become an anthropomorphic representation of the multifaceted nature of God, powerful, strong, and able to defend itself, but also majestic, loving, and gentle. It became a popular symbol for knights to put on their shields, banners, and coats of arms, eventually becoming a symbol of Scotland and the Scottish kings in the process. Today, most biblical scholars will tell you that the re'em that the Hebrew text was referring to was an aurochs, a huge and now extinct ox-like creature. The New Revised Standard Version, the biblical translation that my Disciples of Christ seminary preferred, like most other later translations, replaces the phrase with wild ox, thereby erasing the unicorn from its presence in Scripture. But even though my love of unicorns causes me to be biased, I believe that this substitution does not do the spirit of this text justice. Now, I cannot tell you exactly when my love affair with unicorns began. It is not something that I have carried with me since childhood. I certainly liked unicorns before, but it has not been until very recently that it has turned into the obsession that it has become. I'm sure that the word unicorn entered my vocabulary somewhere around 2011, after watching an episode of the television show Glee entitled I Am Unicorn. In the episode, the character of Kurt, an openly gay teenager, is struggling with the perception that people have of him being too feminine, and he worries that it will hold him back, especially as far as getting leading male roles within the musical theater department. To try and offer up a change of image, he decides to run in the upcoming elections for student class president and to try and project a more masculine persona. He enlists the help of Brittany S. Pierce, a fellow member of the Glee Club, to help him out as his campaign manager, but is shocked when the next day at school she posts a giant poster of him riding on the back of a unicorn and galloping across a rainbow underneath the slogan, "Believe in magic, believe in Kurt Hummel." When Kurt angrily confronts her about the banner, she replies with the iconic quote, "A unicorn is someone who knows they are magical and isn't afraid to show it." Eventually, the episode ends happily, with Kurt learning to be more confident in the own unique person that he is. As a young, queer adult watching that episode, I resonated with the images of self-esteem and self-doubt that the character of Kurt had to encounter, as they were all issues that I had to tackle myself through my own coming-out process. Just like Kurt, I worried whether people would see me for who I was beyond just my sexual orientation, and I had to learn to live into the unique person that I am, that is standing, or rather sitting, before you today. Brittany's quote about unicorns also mentions another, and perhaps the most important aspect of the unicorn that I have not yet touched upon: confidence. Whether depicted as pink and glittery, or whether it is displayed emblazoned on the shield of a knight, the unicorn is still able to stand tall and stand proudly in its own skin. It combines both its powerful aspects and its gentle romantic ones into one beast that refuses to be invisible. In this respect, I feel that it is completely right for God to be seen as a unicorn within this passage of Numbers. For me, God does have the strength of a unicorn. Amid the most insurmountable of odds, when you do not know how things will turn out, and when there are people who look to curse you and bring you down, the universe has a way of bringing a resolution out of any lost and hopeless cause. And just like the unicorn who still stands majestically above it all, it allows you to put your trust in something and find hope that can still be there for you as a source of comfort in your hour of darkness. Ultimately, my response to all the critics and naysayers out there who may not understand my love affair with unicorns is this: just because there is something that may be from out of a fairy tale does not mean that there is not truth in it, and that it does not have something important to say about the greater world that we live in. I take particular inspiration in a quote I recently found from popular theologian Nadia Bolz-Weber. Quote, "I need a God who is bigger and more nimble and mysterious than what I could understand and contrive. Otherwise, it can feel like I am worshiping nothing more than my own ability to understand the divine." As much as we as Unitarian Universalists believe in the inherent worth and dignity of every person, and that we are unique and special, and that our talents can help to create a better world, we live in a culture and a society that tends to focus on conformity and the importance of fitting in. We're often told to not rock the boat by leaning into and embracing our differences and our own uniqueness. The pressures of trying to fit in can be overwhelming, and we can end up losing our sense of self and our identity in the process. But we can all take a lesson from unicorns, who embrace their individuality and still stand out as creatures of immense beauty and strength. They are a reminder to us that it is not only okay to be who we are and celebrate our differences, but that there is an aspect of the divine present in our own uniqueness as well. We were created to be exactly who the divine wanted us to be all along. Let me repeat that. We were created to be exactly who the divine wanted us to be all along. I cannot expect that you will leave today feeling exactly the same way about unicorns as I do, and that was not the intention of the sermon in any way, shape, or form. Okay, maybe it was a little bit. But if I have anything to leave you with, It is that I encourage you to be proud of who you are and to not be afraid of using your unique qualities to make the world a better place. And most importantly, never be afraid of finding magic in the world. The world needs more of the magic and mystery that reminds us of the power and wonder at work in the greater world that we inhabit. May it ever continue to be so. Blessed be. Amen. Shalom. Assalamu alaikum. Namaste. Thank you all so much.